Well, the Colts have done it. They've benched Anthony Richardson. What do we do with him in our Dynasty leagues? We'll discuss that and more on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. No Kate Madjuk today. She'll be back tomorrow. Matt Williamson will also join the show. Follow him on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. We're going to answer your Twitter questions, so make sure that you send them in to us on Wednesday's show. But today, I purposely held off recording the show because Tuesday is generally the day in the NFL where we get a lot of news. And if you wait till about midday, you get a flurry of action. And we did. We've got a couple trades. We got a big-time injury at the wide receiver position. So we're going to get to all of that. But the biggest story coming out of Tuesday afternoon was that the Colts have decided to bench Anthony Richardson in favor of Joe Flacco. Richardson has only started 10 games in the NFL, and he's left, I believe, 5 of those games early with an injury. It's a surprising move, and it isn't, for a couple reasons. Usually, teams will give their quarterback 24 or so starts before pulling the plug. And I'm not saying that the Colts are completely out on Anthony Richardson, but when you bench your 22, 23-year-old quarterback for a 39-year-old Joe Flacco, you're basically giving up on him. But one of the reasons why teams generally want to see these quarterbacks play is they want to see them grow, develop, and try to fight their way through some of these struggles. Unfortunately, with Anthony Richardson, it became very clear that he wasn't improving, and it wasn't even that his game was steadying out a little bit. I think they saw a decline in his play, and I think the combination of him going 2 of 15 or whatever it was early in this game and then tapping his helmet, asking him to come out on a key third down was enough for Chris Ballard, their GM, and their head coach, Shane Steichen, to think, okay, let's take a step back. Let's reevaluate where we are because we're a 4-3 team that just barely lost to the Texans this week. That division's still up for grabs despite them now being, I think, only 2 games back. Where are we as a team? And I think when you look at the AFC this year, you have 5 clear teams: Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Houston, Kansas City, and Buffalo. After those 5 teams, there's a bunch of awful teams, right? And I think Denver, Indianapolis, and the Chargers, those are 3 teams probably competing for 2 wildcard spots. I think it's very realistic to think the Colts could be a wildcard team if they get to 9 wins. Which quarterback is most likely to get them to 9 wins? It's probably Joe Flacco. But again, that's not the reason why they're making this move. I truly believe the main reason they're making this move is because of the wide receivers that they've invested in. I think those players were going to stage a mutiny if they continue to go back to Anthony Richardson, because you saw their stats a couple weeks ago when Flacco was in the game. Michael Pittman was putting up big numbers. Josh Downs put up big numbers. I know Josh Downs put up big numbers this week, but he had a lot of success with Flacco. A.D. Mitchell was getting targets down the field. Alec Pierce had a couple deep passes from Joe Flacco. When those receivers aren't getting fed and they're not getting accurate passes, it brings down the entire morale of the team. And I think this is what happened in Pittsburgh a little bit with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Pittsburgh was 4-2 with Justin Fields. The offense was moving the ball, but none of the receivers were getting any action down the field. And I think there was some belief of, hey, Russell Wilson is a guy that's going to get us the ball more often and more consistently. That's why we want him under center. I think the same thing was happening with the Colts. Those receivers, especially Michael Pittman and Josh Downs, know that Flacco is going to be the quarterback more likely to deliver the ball on time and in target. And that's just not Richardson. So where do the Colts go from here from Anthony Richardson? It sounds like they want to have a hard reset, right? Sit him on the bench, let him be the second team quarterback, let him grow maybe as a leader a little bit. I really think him tapping his helmet coming out of a big third down or coming off the field for a third down was a big deal. Teammates don't like that. Offensive linemen don't get plays off, right? Like you don't get to sub yourself out. Receivers run just about every route down the field, sprinting hard. They don't get to tap themselves out very often. So for a quarterback to do it is pretty concerning. Now, I think the ideal strategy here for Shane Steichen would be to still let Richardson play. Just don't make him the starter, right? Bring him in certain situations, have him play in goal line, continue to get him reps to keep him involved. But if this is a complete benching where he goes down to the third string quarterback and he's a healthy scratch on game days, that's gonna tell you it's completely over. And we mentioned this on yesterday's podcast. He was being drafted as QB 14 coming into the month of October. We projected that he's going to be down in the QB 21, QB 22 range going into November. And now that he's been benched, it's going to fall even further than that because quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins, Tua, Matt Stafford, those guys are all playing right now. And as much as we like the high upside and maybe the long-term future of Anthony Richardson, there's a pretty good chance that this goes the Bryce Young route or the Justin Fields route where you're probably going to have to be a backup for a while. Maybe you can get yourself into a quarterback controversy or battle somewhere else. But I don't think a bunch of teams in the NFL are going to hand him a starting job next year. I certainly don't think that's going to be the Colts. There's no way that Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are going to let Anthony Richardson be a day one starter next year unless he improves dramatically. So I think his dynasty value is tanked. If you have him in your dynasty leagues, you can't sell him because you're going to get nothing. You're going to get pennies on the dollar. I would not buy him if I was an opposing fantasy manager just because I have no idea when he's going to be back in the field. I think there's a good chance he's just clogging a roster spot. Even when he plays, like we've seen this year, as great as he is as a runner, he's not giving you enough in the passing game to make him a worthwhile starter. So right now, he's just a hold. He's just somebody that you have to hold on your roster until something changes. And I honestly don't know when anything's going to change. The good news is here, if you have Michael Pittman, if you have Josh Downs, if you have Alex Pierce, if you have A.D. Mitchell, I think all four of those receivers are going to see a boost in their fantasy value. I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Taylor's production dips a little bit. Playing with a mobile quarterback is a cheat code for those players. Now, maybe he'll get more passes or more targets out of the backfield, but I think for the most part, his value, his role remains unchanged. I do think this is a net positive for the Colts offense. It sucks for Anthony Richardson. It sucks to bench your number 4 overall pick 10 games into his NFL career, but it was pretty obvious that this is the move the Colts had to do to save their season. We'll see how things play out the rest of the year. Let's talk about some of the other moves that happened on Tuesday, including a wide receiver being traded to an AFC contender. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Maybe you're watching that Steelers-Giants game last night. I think the score was 9-9 at one point. And you just knew that Pittsburgh was going to pull it off at the end, playing at home. Go to FanDuel.com. You'll see all the latest odds and lines. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are breaking down the biggest news coming out of Tuesday. And let's start with Diontae Johnson, who was traded from the Carolina Panthers to the Baltimore Ravens. This is 3 teams for Diontae Johnson in the last year. The compensation is pretty cheap. Now, Baltimore's paying $3.8 million of his salary this year, but it's a pick swap from picks. It was a 5th-round pick from Baltimore going to Carolina. Carolina setting a 6th-round pick. There's a chance the difference in those picks is like 14 spots. So essentially nothing. But I do think this is a good spot for Diontae Johnson in the sense of he's going to be playing on a winning team. He's going to be playing with a good quarterback. And I know there's been some misconceptions that playing with Lamar Jackson is bad for fantasy value. I don't think that's been the case this year. We've seen Rashad Bateman have several weeks where he's performed well. He could have had an even bigger week in week 8 if he didn't drop a 60-yard bomb that hit off his face mask. We're seeing Zay Flowers continue to put up over 100 receiving yards every single game. Now, Diontae's value could have been better going somewhere else, but it's certainly better off being in Carolina. This isn't a long-term move for Baltimore because Diontae Johnson is a free agent after this year. The Ravens generally let those type of players hit free agency. And I've got to imagine the plan is Zay Flowers is the number 1 receiver. Let Diontae hit free agency, try to recoup a compensatory pick, probably a 6th-round pick from him hitting free agency, and then continue to draft and develop receivers as they, retool this offense under Lamar Jackson. But for the remainder of this year, I do think Diontae Johnson is a wide receiver 3 flex play. Baltimore's been throwing the crap out of the football. And I think one of the things that's different this year compared to previous seasons in Baltimore is their defense isn't any good. Like, it's just not good at all. You can throw the ball all over them. We saw Tampa Bay do it the week prior before they had the injuries to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. We saw the Bengals do it a couple of weeks ago. You can throw all over this defense. And that means that Baltimore is going to end up in a lot of these shootouts. They're not going to be able to control the clock for 40 minutes of the 60 minutes of a game. They're going to need to score 31, 35 points every single week to win. And that's just going to give Diontae Johnson a lot of opportunities. I think he's still going to be the underneath receiver. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens start to use Zay Flowers more down the field, where if you remember early in the year, like against the Chiefs in week 1, Flowers was the screen receiver, lots of touches near the line of scrimmage. I think they want to progress to making him somebody that can create chunk plays down the field. But having Diontae who can get open on a 3rd and 5 and get you 7 yards is incredibly valuable. So this is a bump up in Diontae Johnson's short-term value. And frankly, I think it's a bump in his long-term value because if he can play well in Baltimore, and I think he will, I think it's going to make him more likely to be attractive in free agency, which could potentially allow him to land in a better landing spot. Because I had some fears that if he was, continue to play in Carolina throughout the rest of the season, that he would have such poor numbers that he just wouldn't be somebody that was attractive at all in free agency. He would basically become an afterthought. So I do think this is where he can go restore some of his fantasy value, dynasty value, and move forward. I don't think it has any impact on, say, Flowers. He's going to continue to get his targets. Derrick Henry is going to continue to get his. Mark Andrews, we've seen him become more useful. Maybe it is a little bit, maybe it does hurt Isaiah Likely. Maybe we don't see as many Isaiah Likely targets. But again, long-term, he's going to be fine. And I think, of course, Lamar Jackson, the more weapons that you can put around him, the more likely he is to continue to give you top 3 numbers at the quarterback position. That wasn't the only big move at quarterback or the news at wide receiver on Tuesday. We also had the injury news to Stefon Diggs, who tore his ACL and will miss the remainder of the 2024 season. This is a blow for Houston because one of the things that they really relied on is these 3 awesome receivers, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stefon Diggs, to carry their offense. And now with Nico Collins on injured reserve, and now with Stefon Diggs out for the year, they're just depleted at receiver. Tank Dell still doesn't look quite the same as he did last year. They still have John Mechie. They still have Robert Wood. So they're going to be able to function for the next couple of weeks until Nico gets back. But in terms of their like long-term ceiling or the ceiling this year, I think this does put them behind teams like Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo. It's a big loss. It's also a huge loss for Stefon Diggs, who was set to become a free agent in 2025. He was going to be the premier receiver on the free agent market. And now, considering his age, he was drafted in the 2015 class. I believe he'll be 31. He'll be 31 next year, coming off a torn ACL. He also has a personality that can rub some people the wrong way. I wouldn't say he's the easiest receiver to play with. This is a big blow to his dynasty value. He was being drafted as wide receiver 35 going into the month of October. I've got to believe after the injury news, he's going to be down in the 55 range, being drafted around Jerry Jeudy, Jacoby Myers, that type of receiver. So massive blow. For Houston, I do think this means a bigger target increase for Tank Dell. I think you can firmly expect him to get more touches. I think Dalton Schultz is expected to get some more work. I also think that the Texans could just become a lot more run heavy, and that means more of Joe Mixon, who is already shouldering a massive load this year. I just think going forward, as long as he stays healthy, we're going to be ranking him as a top 6, top 8 fantasy running back moving forward. I don't see any reason for that to change. Pretty big deal. It's a bummer of an injury. We were really looking forward to seeing the Trayvon Diggs versus Stefon Diggs matchup. That obviously won't happen this year and probably will never happen again. It was one that was anticipated for a while, but it's tough. It's tough when you lose receivers like this. Houston was going all in. They sent a second-round pick for Stefon Diggs. They wanted to have all 3 of these receivers by the time they got into the playoffs. And to lose 2 of those 3 guys before we even get to Halloween is tough. It's a really, really tough outcome. All right, let's talk about Monday Night Football, which had a lot of points kind of in the second half of this game after a bunch of field goals. Let's talk about the biggest winners and losers next. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. I love Hillsdale College. It's so much fun. All you have to do is pop on your phone and you can join a lecture for free at any time. It's so much better than just scrolling on your phone mindlessly for hours and hours. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including, and here's just a few: Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution; Introduction to Free Market Economics; The Great American Story, A Land of Hope; The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic; and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's colleges are self-paced so that you can start whenever you want and tune in whenever. Plus, you can go deeper with reading, quizzes, and discussions, or just sit back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. We absolutely love Prize Picks here on Locked On Dynasty. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Go download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. You can download that podcast wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. All right, let's talk about Monday Night Football. We generally do a recap of that game, but there was so many good news nuggets coming out of Tuesday that we had to talk about Anthony Richardson first. But let's talk about some of the biggest winners and losers. And I think it has to be Tyrone Tracy, who, as a 5th-round rookie, pretty quickly grabbed this job, and he looks awesome. 20 carries for 145 yards and a touchdown, did catch 2 passes for 5 yards before leaving this game with a concussion. Hopefully he's okay. He was able to walk off the field. It doesn't seem like it's anything super major. Might miss a game or two, but he looked great. I thought he looked fantastic. The only other running back in this game to get a touch was Devin Singletary, and those came after Tyrone Tracy was off the field. So it sure seems like Tyrone Tracy is the clear-cut RB1 in New York. And with how well he ran last night, you got to be pretty encouraged. And remember, this is without Andrew Thomas playing at left tackle. This is against a really, really good Pittsburgh defense that has not given up much on the ground at all. Tyrone Tracy was being drafted as RB42 going into the month of October, and he's absolutely outplaying that ADP. I would have to imagine by the time we get to November, that's going to be into the upper 30s, if not the low 20s. So I thought he looked fantastic. Wanted to mention Najee Harris as well. 19 carries for 114 yards, caught 3 passes for 17 yards, didn't get into the end zone. But I think physically, this is the best he's looked in a long time. I think he has 3 straight games with at least 100 yards rushing. He's performing really well in a contract year. He is set to become a free agent in 2025. I think given how he's playing, he could earn a nice chunk of money. And the last player that I wanted to mention was George Pickens, where if you didn't watch this game, you see the stat line 4 for 74, and you're not frustrated by that stat, but maybe you're frustrated overall that on the season through 8 games, he's got 540 yards, only 1 touchdown. But in this game, he had 2 touchdowns taken off the board, one due to a face mask call by Broderick Jones where Pickens scored. I don't know if Broderick Jones's face mask would have caused Russell Wilson to get sacked. That's up for debate. And then there was another touchdown that Pickens had where he caught a pass, he had one of his feet touch the ground twice, and the other one did not, so it didn't count as a touchdown. It was a very unbelievable athletic play that, because of a quirk in the rule book, didn't result in a catch. But these big days are coming, and you look at the 2 games that he's had now with Russell Wilson, even without those touchdowns being accounted for, you're looking at like 180 yards and a touchdown. It's just such a better fit with George Pickens, with Russell Wilson for George Pickens. So I think now if you can buy him, maybe the fantasy manager that has George Pickens didn't watch that game and didn't see what that day could have been. That very easily could have been 6 for 140 and 2 touchdowns. And I think we're having a very different conversation today about George Pickens. So I think he is a buy. Should also mention Malik Neighbors in this game. Not a big Malik Neighbors game. Darius Slayton actually got most of the work, 4 catches for 108 yards, 7 for 71. Neighbors did drop a key pass on 3rd down that could have been a big gain, but I just think this is what we're going to be getting with Neighbors week in and week out. Like, the consistency is going to be there because he got 13 targets, and now maybe the touchdown potential isn't there because of the quarterback play, but we are talking about somebody who can put up 7 for 70 and even and not look great doing it, because that's just how talented Malik Neighbors is. So this Giants offense, while they only scored 18 points, they did have a failed 2-point conversion. They had several trips inside the red zone where they were unable to get points. They had a red zone fumble by Daniel Jones. It wasn't as bad as the final numbers indicated. This could have very easily been a game where the Giants score 28 points. Tyrone Tracy gets into the end zone twice. Darius Slayton should have had a touchdown if the ball was thrown a little bit better on a deep pass. I'm kind of buying this Giants offense even after another 8-point loss on the road. They're 2-6. Brian Dable's committed to Daniel Jones as the quarterback, but I don't think this offense is nearly as bad as maybe the reputation on Twitter or on social media or anything like that. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out that new Locked On NFL show as well. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. On our show tomorrow, Matt Williamson will be here to answer your Twitter questions. Make sure that you send them into us at Williamson NFL. Follow Kate at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we'll see you right back here on Wednesday.